As you just heard already, we're in for a really great treat. This is Thomas Umstattd Jr. He's been blogging, well, no, started on a website, built his own website at 13, at 16, he was already teaching classes on it, and has just gone from there to where he is right now, which is the CEO of Castle Media, which is an umbrella web marketing company, and they help authors get themselves online and promote themselves. They help small businesses do the same thing. And he has WebRoots Media, which helps conservative candidates get websites online as well. So would everybody please help me welcome Thomas.
All right, welcome. We're going to be talking about effective blogging, but I'd like to make some tweaks to the title, if that's all right. I'd like to talk instead about boosting blog traffic, which is very similar. And instead of giving you 12 secrets, I'd like to give you 19. That's is everyone cool? Slight modification last minute. So first, a little bit of introduction. And I'd like to ask the question, what brings people to blogs? Why would someone visit a blog in general? And you can categorize the things that draw people to blogs into several overarching categories. And those are search, Google, etc., email, social, syndication, direct traffic, and referral traffic. And we're going to go through each one of these different channels and talk about how you can boost traffic to your blog from that channel. But first, I want to talk a little bit about excellence. If you are not blogging well, if your blog is boring to read, no amount of boosting traffic to your blog, no amount of tactical decisions are going to help. As someone once said, good marketing helps bad products fail faster. Right? If your soda tastes awful, getting everyone in the country to taste it guarantees that no one will be drinking your soda next month. So on that, I'd like to give you one tip to rule all the other tips. If you think of excellence as the dough, everything that I'm going to be talking about through the rest of this talk are the toppings that we're going to put on top of the pizza. Which means that if you don't get this one tip, nothing, the rest of it is not going to help. And that is to be remarkable. Now, when I'm using the word remarkable here, I'm using Seth Godin's definition of remarkable. I'm seeing several of y'all nodding. You've read his book, Purple Cow. And Seth Godin defines marketing as, or remarkable as something worth making a remark about. So your blog can be remarkably funny. It could also be remarkably bad. Has anybody seen the Friday video? It's Friday, Friday. Yesterday was Thursday. Tomorrow is Saturday. Right? 100 million views on YouTube. People would watch that and they're like, oh my gosh. And then they go to Twitter and like, y'all have got to watch this video. It's so bad. 100 million. That's a lot of people. That's Super Bowl ratings for a video because it was remarkable in a way that was unfortunate. You know, she would rather have been remarkable for being something else. So how do you do this? How do you become remarkable? Well, one key tip is to create what's called a shareable value proposition. So that's a lot of jargon. Let me try to explain it. That's the one girl saying to the other girl, you should totally visit this blog because blank. Why would someone who doesn't know you recommend your blog to someone else who doesn't know you? And if this is unclear in your mind, it will never be clear in the minds of the people visiting your website. You need to know, my blog helps people with X because of Y. And so, some of you are like, well, I blog for myself. I blog to kind of express my feelings, and that's great. But you need to realize that your readership is not going to get much beyond yourself and the people in your personal circle. The only people who read your blog are going to be people interested in you instead of interested in your topic. Does that make sense? All right. So, end of the intro, now for the secrets. And the first secret we're going to talk about, this next cluster is about search. How to boost your search traffic. So I'm not going to go real in-depth onto the technical parts. We already had a talk on that. But I want to give you some big pictures, some kind of broad brushstrokes. And the first one is to focus your writing. So what's the difference between a firecracker and a rifle round? Ultimately, they both have roughly the same amount of gunpowder. In fact, you can get firecrackers that have more gunpowder than you can rounds of ammunition. But the difference is that the bullet is focused by the muzzle of the gun. And all of that energy is directed to just one place. If you look through a scope of a rifle, you're not looking at most of what there is to see. It hides from your vision almost everything so that one little bit in the distance comes into focus and that you can be seen it clearly. And this is the key if you want to rank on Google. Because if they want something on a general topic, we already have a great website on it. It's called Wikipedia, and you will never beat Wikipedia. I hate to break it to you, that's the second unfortunate truth. One, no one cares about you. Two, you'll never beat Wikipedia. And so, I know, these are great secrets, right? It's better to focus your writing on a single topic than it is to have an unfocused blog. So you start to gain a score in Google called relevancy, where Google feels that you're relevant to certain topics and certain word clusters. And if you're blogging all over the board, you lose all of those relevancy points because Google doesn't know what you're talking about. If you're talking about politics today and health tomorrow and technology on the third day, Google looks at that and they're like, this is a little confusing, and you don't become as relevant as you could be. The third tip is to use Google Analytics, which should go without saying. Quick show of hands, who here uses Google Analytics? Okay, about half the room. Some of you are on WordPress.com, which doesn't have Google Analytics, but you have a package very similar to Google Analytics, helps answer a lot of the same questions. Google Analytics gives you some great intel on your blog. What keywords are people searching for to find you? What posts are popular? How much time are people spending on your site? So you all know that, but one thing I'd like to encourage you to do is to set goals in Google Analytics and then evaluate your site based off of those goals. So who here has a goal set up for their site? One person. Most people don't use the goals feature in Google Analytics. They have all this data, but they don't know what to do with that data. And Google can actually help that data make sense. And to give you an idea of the kinds of goals you can set traffic goals, you can set time on site goals, you can also set page target goals, which are particularly helpful. Let's say you've got a product on your website that someone can buy, and it brings them to a thank you for your purchase page. You set up that thank you for the purchase page, and you can set a value for that page. That's a $20 product. The value of that page is $20. So these actions have such and such dollar value in each page, and Google will do that math for you. Very, very cool. You can ask Google how to set this up, because that's a whole talk in and of itself.
But you could set that up on a WordPress?
You configure it in Google Analytics, but as long as Google Analytics is added to your WordPress site, yes, you can set that up. It's Google Analytics and WordPress get along very easily. All right, tip number 4 is to optimize your images. This is some of the lowest hanging fruit for boosting search traffic to your website that a lot of people overlook. And WordPress makes this really easy. So here's a WordPress interface window for uploading an image. This is from a slightly older version of WordPress, but not much has changed. So you see here where it says title, and you see where it says alternate text. This alternate text, the purpose of that was to create it so that blind people or people with visual impairments can enjoy the web. They can have a text describing what that photo is about. And that's what you want to use that text for. But if you're using relevant images, these become weighted keywords for you ranking for phrases. You want to be using relevant images and putting those images here in your alternate text and in your title. Also, this is a tip I see very few people doing. See this image file name up here? twitterapps.jpg. If I were to add a dash there, Google would see the file name as Twitter apps. And it sees dashes, which is the minus sign on your keyboard, as a space. One of my very top blog posts for years ranked for the keyword Michael Dorn. Anybody here know who that is?
Oh, yeah.
Nerd chat.
Yeah, no.
He's the character who plays Worf. And I had done a blog post on 5 ways Star Trek conventions and GOP conventions are alike. Because it's a kind of a political post. And people came and they would Google Michael Dorn, and because I had done this, I had Michael Dorn, Michael-Dorn.jpg. When people did a Google image search for Michael Dorn, they'd see him as one of the top results. They'd click on the image, and then they'd see the title, and they were hooked. They're like, what? Maybe being a Republican's not so bad. They read the post and like, oh, yeah, it is so bad.
So your title, your alt text is going to be weighted keywords, your title, and then your file name.
Right, you want these all to line up. So these need to be the same words in each one. Because what most people do is it's like iStock 496.538.jpg, and there's no keywords there. And those are Google points you're just leaving on the table. So describe the image so that people searching for the image can find your site. Yes, they're not the best visitors in the world. Many of them will come, steal the image, and leave. But some of them will come and stay. And it's a very effortless thing that you can incorporate into your habits to boost your traffic. Yes?
Do you optimize the image prior to uploading it in the properties and details area?
I don't, but that does work. Google also looks at the metadata inside the image itself. And this is a really hot tip that most people don't know about. So if you have Photoshop, the for reals expensive version of Photoshop, you can go in, and I think Lightroom does this too. Each JPEG has a metadata table, a lot like an MP3 does. It has information, and Google will go into those images and look at them, even in Flickr. So I know people who do search engine optimization for their sites by putting information in the images that they upload to Flickr.
Is there one particular field that it's looking at, or a bunch of them?
So there's some of those fields are like date, location, title, I think is one of the fields, and that's where you would put the keywords. This is a level of wizardry that's slightly above what I put into my blogs. And one more tip on photos before we leave. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use photos effectively. When someone visits your blog, their attention span starts draining away as soon as they visit your site. This is one of the reasons why it's so important to have a quick website. Because if it takes 7 seconds for your website to load, you've already lost 7 seconds of attention is drained off your website. And if you can drop that to 2 seconds, suddenly you have a much better chance of retaining someone and adding sand back to the top of the funnel. So we have this hourglass. Certain things that you do on your website will put sand back into the top of the hourglass to keep people there for longer periods of time. So one tip here that I'd like to give you is to don't wrap text on your blog. So we do this because it's what looks right to us. In print, this is what we're used to seeing. There's some sort of image, we have text over here and text down below. Because in print, the most expensive thing about print is the paper. So it's all about squeezing as much onto the paper as possible. Font sizes get smaller, text is wrapping around. Every square inch of a newspaper has something in it, because to have it empty would be a waste of paper. But online, you have unlimited paper. You have unlimited space. What is scarce online? Attention. People, the only reason someone would read your blog is if it's the most interesting thing on the entire internet. For that person at that time. If there's anything else more interesting on the internet, they're going to go to that more interesting thing, which is another reason why focus is so critical. So instead of putting your image up here, I would encourage you to do something like this, where the image sits on its own line with all of this delicious white space on the side. I have tested this, and I found that if you're writing a blog post and your images sit on their own lines, people tend to spend more time on that page, because the image gives them a breather. It's like a put sand back into the top of that hourglass so there's more to drain through. And this is the art. If you want to pull someone through a 1,000-word or a 1,500-word blog post, which is way longer than what I typically recommend, you can do that if you're continually using images to help tell that story, to help communicate your message, which means that you need to use concrete images. The powerful thing about images is that it moves you from abstract language that people don't understand into the arena of simile and metaphor. So, so-and-so's policy is like such and such concrete example. The kingdom of heaven is like a flame of fire. It's like good fish and bad fish. Something concrete that people can imagine, that they can touch. And it helps you be simpler, and it also gives, let me put it this way. If you're having a hard time thinking of what image to use for your blog post, that's a bad sign. It means your blog post is unclear. If it's very easy to find an image, that means you're doing a better job writing that blog post. Does that make sense? All right. Optimize headings. This is something, I'd probably say 50% of the WordPress community does this, 50% skips it. And WordPress makes this super easy. So we have here a post, and we have an embedded video. If you click here, see where it says paragraph right there? You click that, you have these options of headings. And it drops in, for those of you who know HTML, an H1 or an H2 or an H3 tag. Well, Google actually sees those H1, H2, H3 tags, and they're like, ooh, bonus points to these words. Now, don't use heading 1, because if you have a good theme, your title of your post is going to be heading 1. And Google wants to see only one use of heading 1. But it wants to see multiple uses of heading 2. You can also use heading 3 if you'd like. I've heard differing views as to how much weight Google gives to heading 3. And for the most part, what I've heard is headings 4 and below, it just treats as regular text.
So heading
Yes,
2
ma'am.
is a heading within the post.
Right.
And then
It's a
where
subheading.
would you have text?
So this post, this screenshot is perhaps not the best screenshot, but we have a sentence of text. This is just regular paragraph text here. So Google looks at your paragraph text, but you get some bonus points for those headings. And so just be cognizant of what words you're putting in your headings. If you have Scribe SEO, which the copy blogger media people put out, it will actually read your headings and ask you, kind of show you, here are the keywords in your headings, are these the keywords you're wanting to optimize for? And it'll help you through some of that process.
That's called Scribe.
Scribe, S-C-R-I-B-E. It's a paid premium plugin. It's between, is it $50 a month to $50 a month?
Not very much.
Yeah. For what you get, it's totally worth it, and it's a great education. So after you've been using Scribe for a few months, you'll find you don't really need it anymore.
It's coming out with a new version.
Excuse me?
It's coming out with a new version.
Yes, it's coming out with a cool. We have a copy blogger guy here. I
actually created Scribe.
Oh, very good. I love Scribe. We bundle Scribe in with our hosting for our clients.
Thank you.
I really like it. So I want to talk to you later. All right. So that's the end of search. So with email, I want to talk about email. And I want to say something about email, because we're all tech people here, right? We're nerds, and we're like, email, that's so 90s. Nobody uses email anymore. That is not true. Email is still a really big deal. It's often, for most people, the first thing that they do when they sit at their computer. There's a huge percentage of social media users that all social media is an extension of their inbox. They go to Facebook when they get an email telling them to go to Facebook. And email is where they experience the web. Which means that if your blog is not showing up in email, you're missing out on tons of traffic. So yes, email's going down, especially younger people are starting to use go to Facebook first. In fact, when I was in college, Facebook was new and everyone used it as their only messaging mechanism. So you'd send someone an email, it would be 2 weeks, they wouldn't see it. You'd write it on their wall and they would call you up 5 minutes later because they're like hovering on their Facebook page. But that's not how it is for most people. Most people still use email primarily. And so how do you use email to boost traffic to your blog? Well, the very easy way is to allow email subscriptions. Most people don't know what an RSS feed is, and if you allow them to subscribe to your blog by email, it can double the number of your subscriptions. This is what I've seen. Seth Godin has seen it. He says about half of his subscribers subscribe by email. And years of education on RSS haven't seemed to change this number very much. And it's kind of perplexes me. Because once you learn RSS, you never go back to email because it's such a better platform. So how do you do email subscriptions? Well, one way is feedburner.google.com. FeedBurner has a great RSS to email functionality that's built right in. And it allows people and you can add the icon or you can add a form to your sidebar. When you update your blog, it will send out an email like at 3 a.m. in the morning. You kind of select what time it sends once a day. And it hits your whole list. And the wonderful thing about FeedBurner is that it's free regardless of how many subscribers that you have. So it's a very easy way of getting your blog into people's inboxes. Now you can also use MailChimp, which I love. It's another service I really like. MailChimp allows you to have up to 2,000 free subscribers, which is great. After that you start to pay. MailChimp gives you much more power, much more flexibility with how your email looks and customizable. It's much more like a fully functional email program. So you're sending out, people can subscribe to your blog by email. You want to put in those blog posts that you're writing that are going out in email, links to older posts. Because this is what's going to bring people back to your website. And this will also be good for your search rankings if these links have good anchor text. So don't say click here to go to this other website or this other page to see my 7 tips on being awesome. You say, check out my 7 tips on being awesome, and that 7 tips on being awesome is what's blue and underlined. That's what we call anchor text. And Google sees that and they're like, oh, this post is about being awesome. And it's another quick SEO tip.
And that's in your post?
You put that in your post, and then FeedBurner will pull that and send it out to your email. So it does a double function. Email people will click on it and go to your website. Google will see it and know what that page is about. So yeah, that's another SEO tip. Another very easy thing to do is to put your blog URL in your email signature. If If you're just getting started and you have 0 traffic, this is one of your best ways to get those initial visitors. Because you may send out 10, 20, maybe 100 emails a day. I send probably 50 emails a day. I'm emailing back and forth with all these different people. So if you drop your blog, so here's a Lorem Ipsum example, but in your signature down below, you might have yourwebsite.com/blog. And what will happen is your friends will see that and like, oh yeah, Thomas has a blog. I haven't checked that out in a while. And they may go check it out. I'll find that if I reply all to a big group, I sometimes will see retweets of blog posts shortly after that if I've got my blog in the signature. And it's really subtle and it's not spammy. It's not like, what I'm not recommending that you do is email your whole address book and say, please check out my blog. I'll let you do that one time when you first launch your website and ask them, what do you think? And then you're not allowed to hit them anymore because they haven't opted into that. But if they email you a question and you email them back an answer and your website happens to be in the signature, they'll check it out and that can be a great source of more traffic. All right, so that's the end of email. Now let's talk about social. So very basic tip. Hopefully y'all are all doing this already, and that is to attach a Twitter and Facebook account to your blog. So one of the reasons why RSS is not gaining in popularity is that people are using Twitter and Facebook as their feed aggregator. So I may not know what a Google Reader is, but I'm on Twitter, and so I want to follow you on Twitter to know when your new posts come out. And so if you're not on Twitter, and if you're not on Facebook, you're leaving traffic on the table, and you're making it harder for people to find you. Because each person has their own preferred platform. And the bigger your reach, the bigger the multiplier. So here is you, here are the people who follow you, and here are the people that follow them. So the bigger the number you have here, the bigger the number you have here. And you've got to add value. If you're just saying, please come to my website all the time, that's not going to work. But if you're sharing value and you're being helpful here, and your blog is helpful, then when you share it, it will share on. And this is what's really fun, is once you started to build a community around your blog and you know your next post is going to get multiple retweets. It's like when Copyblogger posts a new post, it's just this huge flood comes through of people retweeting links to that post for hours after that when they see that first tweet, because it reminds them, oh, there's a new post, and that number on the, which we'll get to in just a second, of how many tweets it has goes up, which creates a social proof, which makes people more likely to tweet it in the future. So it becomes a virtuous cycle.
Thomas?
Yes.
For those who need a rule or some kind of mathematical, ratio, Chris Brogan and a whole lot of people kind of profess and practice put out something useful to other people and informative that would be helpful to your following 9 times for every 1 time you make a request or try to do any kind of promotion, because it's very forgivable then. But if you're breaking that rule, you're usually not being a servant leader first, you're being a taker.
Exactly.
Or you're hoping to be a taker.
That's right.
And in social media, with all the social technology, it's called social business, it's relational. It doesn't really care about you or your stuff unless you're adding value every day.
That's right.
Or at least every time you're present.
Right. And people have a very low tolerance for salesy. Another ratio I'd recommend is 3 at reply messages for every 1 hit to the whole list message. And that's often a real indication of how healthy someone's Twitter account is how many at replies they're sending. And so some people are just blasting their list every time they say anything to Twitter, and they're not having conversations with individuals, and that's not healthy either. But yeah, the 9 to 1 is a great ratio.
What, I don't understand the 3 to 1.
Oh, so on Twitter, if you start your tweet with an @ sign and then someone's username, that only goes to that one person. So let's say I sent Lisa a tweet and I put @Lisa. Well, it goes just to Lisa. But let's say we have a mutual friend who's following both of us. He'll see that tweet, but let's say you're just following me, you won't see that tweet. So it's a very quick summary of kind of how Twitter works. Twitter is one of those things that doesn't make sense to explain it. The people inside can't explain it, and the people outside don't understand it. And so the best way to learn Twitter is to just get in there and start playing with it.
It's like a cocktail party. If you send it to your whole list or to your whole Twitter feed, it's like you're at a cocktail party with a megaphone that says, hey, look at this, look at me, look at what I just put out here. Whereas if you speak to a person, it's got an @ sign in front of it. Does that help you?
Yeah. All right. Thank you. The next tip is to be bold. No one wants to read a timid blogger. controversy draws attention. It also draws comments. So y'all were wondering, we were talking before we got started officially, what sorts of things that can you do to get comments? Make people mad. You know, ruffle some feathers, take a stand on something. In school, we're often trained to be very cautious with our writing because we don't want to make the professor angry or the teacher angry. Well, that totally doesn't work online. You've got to take a stand for something and be a little controversial. I remember doing a post with 7 differences between published and unpublished writers. And it was all of these things about, you know, rhythms in people's lives and how disciplined they were, and oh my gosh, people hated that post. All of these unpublished writers were like, it's not true! And they were getting on Twitter and sending out tweets, this is an awful post, link. And I'm like, I'll take that. And a few people were getting on there like, yeah, you know, I agree, or it's sad but true, or whatever. But that controversy is what spurs up that conversation. And so you don't want to be a jerk for the sake of being a jerk. But you do want to pick your battles. And if you're not picking any battles, you're not going to do as well in terms of comments, you're not going to do as well in terms of retweeting. And the more stronger of a stand you take, what you'll find is the people who agree with you will flock to defend you. So a lot of people are terrified that they're going to get negative comments on their blog. Let me tell you, as someone who's been blogging for a long time, you've got to earn negative comments. The first thing someone's going to do if they see you on the internet being wrong, you're like, idiot, there's an idiot on the internet. It's like, there's this great XKCD comic where it's like, come on honey, go to bed. He's like, no, there's someone on the internet who's wrong. I can't go to bed until they're wrong. It's never going to happen, right? People post stuff to the internet faster than you can correct them. And so when someone leaves you a negative comment, what they're saying is, I think you're influential enough that I feel obligated to correct you, because if I don't, you're going to influence so many people the wrong way. And so it's really a compliment to you. I mean, many people blogged for years before they ever earned their first negative comment. I had a client who's a literary agent, and a couple of things happened to him in the same week. One, he got featured on Stumbled Upon, first time to like the front page of Stumbled Upon, started getting tons of traffic. And the other was a self-published author who's very famous, PageRank 6 blog, took a post that my client had written on the publishing industry and critiqued it line for line, explaining how my client was wrong with a link to his website. So my client's like, ah, because it was really mean. I mean, it was a mean-spirited critique. In fact, it was so mean that people were coming to the defense of my client because they're like, that guy's being a jerk. But, oh, by the way, he got a link to his website from a PageRank 6 blog. Google doesn't care if someone agrees with you or not. And it was also, it was a do follow link with nice rich anchor text linking to the title of the post. And it was like, you know, with sugar and frosting and, oh, by the way, some, you know, razors inside. All right, tip number 10, and I really should sit down and let the copy bloggers speak on this because they're the kings of magnetic headlines. But your headline will travel around the world a dozen times before anyone even sees the content of your post. Why? Because when something's shared on Twitter, what do they see? All they see is the headline. If someone is emailed a URL and you're using good, pretty permalinks, and you've got keywords there in the URL, all they see is your headline or fragments of your headline. If someone shares your post on Facebook, they see your headline, the opening paragraph, and a photo. And so this headline is critical. It's good copywriters, it's not uncommon for them to spend as much time on the headline as they do on the entire rest of the post. Or, and I would add to that, the image. Because if you have a really good image on that post, that can also really help, especially if you're going for a Facebook-centric strategy. So, one question I like to ask is, what is the goal of a blog title? When we were writing essays in school, the goal of the title of the post was to describe the post, or kind of give the teacher an indication of what you're writing about. So that 1,000 words on Christopher Columbus that you had to have due on Tuesday, the title of the essay was Christopher Columbus, right? Well, that's great for describing it, but blog titles are different. I would submit to you that the purpose of a blog title is to sell the post. They have to buy that blog post from you, and it will cost them 2 to 5 minutes of their time. Time that they will never get back. They will live the entire rest of their life and die, and those 5 minutes will never be given back to them. Time is our most precious asset, and you're asking when you share a link with someone to give you that most precious asset in exchange for what? And if you write a good title, they're very happy to make that exchange. I will give you 5 minutes of time for this value, this you meeting this felt need that I have. So that's the big picture. A couple of tactical things other than going and reading everything Hobby Blogger has to say about titles. One is to use a magnetic word. So you may be asking, what words are magnetic? What words draw people to your website? You ready? Here they are. Who, what, why, when, where, and how. The question words. Why are these magnetic? Because a question word excites curiosity in the mind of your readers. So if you put in a question in the title, even if it's a question word or it's an indication that you're answering that word, they'll be curious what the answer to that question is. And depending on if the topic is a match for interests that that person has, then they will be much more likely to read it. Another thing I would recommend is to use a magnetic number.
I see, you did it.
So put some sort of number into the post. So y'all ready to know what the magnetic numbers are? All of them. The one thing you need to know about X, or 57 tips for Y. So you have everything from people who use short numbers, or there's some school of thought that like the holy numbers work better, 3, 7, 12. If it's a number you see in the Bible, it's a more effective number. I'm not convinced that that is really the case. Because Smashing Magazine, any of y'all read Smashing Magazine? Great, I'd highly recommend to you. It's a great blog on WordPress and on development and design. And they give away free themes. And they will have 50 tips for X. And the post is 5,000 words long. You're like, gee whiz, who would read this? And then you go and see the subscribers, and they have like 100,000 subscribers, or 1 million subscribers. I mean, it's a very, very popular website. And they use really big numbers. Other people use smaller numbers. All right, tip number 11 is to allow low friction sharing. You want to make sharing your blog posts with others as easy as possible. It means dropping in, the obligatory social sharing buttons. And you're like, I have no idea what this robot is here. Why would I want that on my website? Well, you don't need to know what the robot is for your users to use it. So this is the Reddit guy, and I think he's actually an alien. But Reddit's very popular, and the people who use Reddit will look for that, especially if you're starting to be featured on Reddit. It makes it a lot easier for them if they can just hit that Reddit button.
Spell Reddit, R-E-D-D-I-T?
R-E-D-D-I-T.
That
Yes,
is?
thank you. So there are WordPress plugins that will drop these all in for you. And they look stuff like, they can look like this. But here's what I found in my testing. Buttons with numbers get more clicks. Now they're slightly more complicated to develop. So here we are, we've got a post. We have the number of tweets, number of likes, the number of +1s. You can't add these for all the services for a couple of reasons. One is they don't all have an API that will share those numbers with you. And two, unless you really know what you're doing, it can slow down your site considerably because it's making API requests on every page load. But if you're strategic, and the default I'd recommend is Twitter. If you only do one, I'd probably do Twitter if your audience is on Twitter. But Facebook and Google Plus are good as well. You may be like, why have Google Plus when the numbers are so much lower? Well, unfortunately, Google, in all of their powerfulness, has decided that Google Plus is very important for search rankings, which means those +1s count 10 times more than the others. Now, there is some, I know it's stupid, but there's some political drama here. So in Facebook, so if you know the history of Facebook, you know that early on, Microsoft spent like $500 million to buy like 0.5% of Facebook, really early in Facebook. Everyone, or it gave a valuation of $500 million to Facebook, something like that. And everyone was like, Facebook, Microsoft, you are crazy. This is this worthless site, no one has heard of it. Why are you giving so much money? But in that agreement they signed, they told Facebook, you can't make a deal with Google without our permission. And so when you do a Bing search, it's got all this Facebook data of who your Facebook friends and what they've liked. And Google has the worst case of Bing Facebook integration envy. And so they're really pushing the +1 button because that's something that they control. And they seem to have this love-hate relationship with Twitter. Like sometimes they're getting data from Twitter, sometimes they don't seem to be getting data. Recently it seems like they're getting lots of data from Twitter. They've kind of made some sort of agreement. So I would encourage you to incorporate numbers with buttons if you're wanting to get the numbers up. If you're getting some sort of numbers. So if these numbers all show 0, it makes you look like really desperate for visitors. And it can give people a false indication that you're not getting any traffic. So your numbers should never be 0. Why? Because you should send out a tweet to your own stuff. So you send out 9 helpful tweets and then a tweet to your own post, which gets the number to 1. And if your title is nice and magnetic, and it offers a clear value, you should get a couple of retweets from that. So when we do out a blog post, we get retweets pretty much every time. Sometimes we get dozens of retweets. And what's cool about Twitter is that those retweets can then be retweeted, and each one of those tweets counts on this ticker, making that number go up. Another very easy way to get social traffic is to solicit guest posts from people who have big social followings. So let's say I'm kind of new, and I don't have a lot of followers, and I don't have a lot of people who like my fan page, but Lisa over here is kind of a big deal, and she's got a gazillion people following her. We'd be like, Lisa, how would you like to write a post for my blog? And Lisa, if she's a nice person, maybe she'll agree, or I might write a guest post for you, you write a guest post for me. And then, invariably, when you ask someone to write a guest post for you, what do they do when they posted it to your blog? They tweet out a link to it to all of their fans. And if your topics are similar, then some of those people will connect to you and connect to your blog. So this idea that people who blog on my same topic are my enemies, that you've got to die to that. That idea will kill you. The people who blog on your same topic are your allies. You want to reach out to them, make friends with them, because y'all can help each other. We are at the point of the internet where we're here and the potential is out here. So fighting people over this tiny little pie that we have now is a complete waste of time. There's so much more pie to get. There are so many more fields that have never been planted. It doesn't make sense to fight over the few that still have grain on them. All right, so that's enough about social. Now let's talk about syndication. And I apologize for this big word, but I couldn't think of a better word to describe this. So syndication is a big word for this little orange icon that you'll see all over the internet, which stands for RSS, which is, again, a very useful acronym that stands for really simple syndication. So we go back to, if you don't know what syndication means, this doesn't mean a whole lot. But RSS is a way for people to subscribe to your blog through some sort of means other than email. So just real quick, who here uses Google Reader or some sort of other RSS reader? Probably about half the room, which is pretty typical. One of the cool things about Google Reader, though, is that it automatically formats for the iPhone and for the iPad. And there's some really cool apps for the iPhone and iPad that make reading blogs a much more enjoyable experience. So instead of reading blogs via leaning over your desk experience, you're a leaning back in your couch experience. And it's much more like reading the newspaper than it is like doing work on your computer. So some tips here. I recommend that you give the full feed. It's really annoying when you give part of the feed, especially if they're on a mobile device, because then they have to go and load that second page. So in WordPress, you have the option. You can give an excerpt, or you can give the full feed. I recommend that you give the full feed. And if you're having trouble with scrapers, just put links to your old stuff in your feed. I know people who've had, scraping is when some bot steals your content and posts it on their own website. I know people who've boosted their search rankings by putting lots of internal links in their content, and then as the bots go and copy their site all over, they're creating all of these links back to their website. It's boosting their search rankings. And so, and giving the excerpt is not going to scare away the bots. They can scrape your content anyway. Again, I recommend FeedBurner. Not only will it send the emails, it will also help make your feed easier to subscribe to. It gives you statistics on how many people read your feed. So when someone hits this button, you don't want to give them a page of code. You want to give them a page with easy-to-click buttons so they can add it to the, My Yahoo or to Google. FeedBurner is what generates this page for you automatically. So if you're using FeedBurner, your site will be a lot easier to subscribe to. Another tip is to explain what an RSS feed is. I think every blogger needs to do this about every 6 months or so, or tweet out a link to an old post that you have explaining what an RSS feed is. It's our obligation as the bloggers of the world to help educate the poor people who don't understand what an RSS feed is, how much better their lives could be if all that stuff wasn't coming to their email. And then look for the 16th tip here, and then we'll go to questions, is to look for places where you can post your feed. A great place to do this is LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a WordPress app that puts on your LinkedIn profile your most recent posts. These are, the anchor text is the title of your post, and these are do follow links. These are nice juicy links for free from LinkedIn, which has great domain authority on their core domain. And this is a really easy way, this is an easy tip, this is something you do one time, it runs automatically after this. And if you get even relatively decent traffic to your LinkedIn profile, people are going to be curious about your blog. So don't blog anything you don't want it to be seen on LinkedIn, because they'll find it one way or another. And this can bring you some really easy traffic. You'll start to see
Go
it.
back over that again.
Yeah,
I didn't understand where you missed that.
I didn't put the steps, but you see this link up here, this add application? If in LinkedIn, you look for this link. And you
Okay,
can add,
okay.
right, so this is an application inside of LinkedIn, and there's lots of applications like this around the web on different sites. And so you click add application, you select the WordPress one, you paste in the URL for your blog, and for your RSS feed, and I would recommend that you paste in the FeedBurner feed, because that way it's getting tracked through FeedBurner. And if your blog ever moves, you can easily have the FeedBurner change to where it's listening, so you don't lose your subscribers as you move from domain to domain or from server to server. So this is really easy. You can also Google, how do I add my WordPress blog to LinkedIn? You'll find some really good guides on how to do it. All right, direct traffic. There's not a lot I have to say about here. Direct traffic, for those of you who don't know, this is someone who types in your blog directly into their browser. Or if it's in an infographic and they see it and they type it in, that's one way they might get it. So one way to improve direct traffic, and this, I don't have a slide for this, but this is when you're first starting your website, pick a domain that passes the radio test. What is the radio test? The radio test is if I tell you the name of my website, or if you hear it over the radio, can you type it in? So the one thing you need to know.com fails the radio test, because I don't know how to spell the word one. Is it the number one, or is it the word one? Or Umstattd media fails the radio test. Why? Because no one knows how to spell Umstattd. So words that are easily confused fail the radio test. So it's not about having a short website URL in terms of how many characters. It's about having a short website URL in terms of memory units. So if you have 3 easy to spell words that may equal 15 characters, how many things do they have to remember? 3 things, those 3 words. And so you can get away with a longer URL if you're, depending on what words you're picking. Also, you can promote your blog offline, put it on your business card, any sort of, if you're blogging for a company, make sure you've got the URL anywhere on publications that go out, flyers, that sort of thing. Be an easy source of additional direct traffic. All right, finally, in a direct, let's talk about referral. One very easy way of getting referral traffic is to guest post on other blogs. You come to conferences like this, you build relationships with other bloggers, and you're offering them a great value. You're offering them a one-day vacation of posting on their blog. Which, those of you who are blogging consistently, this is a real asset. I have clients who have 30,000 people, 40,000 people to their blog, but they keep that up through a really consistent posting schedule. And it's a monthly visitors. And so they love getting guest posts because that keeps them from losing traffic if they want to take a break. 30,000 people in your niche, that's not a small number. And typically, you're thanked for guest blogging with a link back to your blog. So it's typically at the top or at the bottom, there'll be some sort of short bio, maybe a small photo of you, and a link back to your blog. That's a great place to get referral traffic, and that link typically is a do follow link, so it'll help you with Google as well. So here's an example of a guest post. So you see we have here a photo of the guest blogger, and then at the bottom would be a link to her website. There's a lot of black hat things you can do to boost traffic through referrals I wouldn't recommend. But ultimately, the key to referrals is what I talked about at the very beginning, which is to provide value. If what you're talking about is helpful, the posts are truly interesting, or truly entertaining, or truly helpful, people will want to link to those. If they're answering questions that people are asking, that's the sort of thing that gets you links. Begging doesn't work very well. Now, you can beg me all you want to get a link to your website. You can offer to pay me, and that will not work. I will not pay you. And that's another thing. You have to be careful, because there's a lot of people who offer to do a guest post for you, and if you've never heard of them before, they're probably some like link farm person who's going to write you this really awful guest post. So you never want to just accept a guest post you haven't read, and you want to be careful what you post to make sure it doesn't have any spammy links. So again, it's called social media for a reason. You want to have relationships with each other. You want to be interacting with real people, not fake people or avatars of people. All right. One point in closing, and then we'll go to questions. And that is to be patient. Blogging is much more like farming than it is like hunting. So a lot of traditional outbound marketing is like hunting, where you go out into the woods, you shoot some big animal, and you have tons of food for the next 2 weeks, and then you're hungry again. So our ancestors, that's how they lived. And of course, they didn't have guns. They'd go out, they'd go shoot a woolly mammoth or a deer. They'd bring it back to the village, and everyone would be stuffed until they ran out of meat, and then they'd have to go and do it again. And it was exciting, and it was fun. And outbound marketing can be exciting and fun in those ways, but it's also exhausting, and it's expensive over time. Whereas farming, what results do you get when you first start farming? Nothing. You get to a patch of dirt with trees growing on it. You do all this work just to clear the trees. Are you getting food at that point? No. And then you plow and you plow and you plow. Now do you have food? No. Then you plant. Do you have food? No. Then you water. Then you weed. And then maybe you get this great return. Now the great benefit, though, is that that's a reproducible process. And it gets easier, because the next time you do it, the plowing's not as hard, because the field's already been plowed once before. And there's no more trees on the ground. And maybe if you've been watering it right, the soil is starting to get better enzymes, better nutrients, so you get that consistent food. Now, we live in a society where almost everything we eat is based off this farming model. Even the meat that we eat, that meat has been fed food that grew on a farm. Because this, if you're wanting consistent results, is the best way. Now, whether the farm and all of that is healthy for us is a whole different discussion. But for your blog, it's absolutely healthy to be consistent and persistent in what you're doing and not to expect overnight results. And if you stick with it, you get this wonderful thing where that flywheel starts to turn around and that momentum is building and you're getting results whether or not you're working right this day or not. So with that, we'll go to questions. What questions? Yes, ma'am.
When you talked about having a guest blogger, can you edit their work, or can you see it, or is it unreasonable to ask to see it before you post it, or?
Whenever I post a guest post on one of my blogs, we always edit it. Now we have edited it too much where the guest blogger is like, you killed my voice. Please don't post my post. Of course, that we basically rewrote because it was a terrible article. We really wanted to try to save it. So you want to follow good editorial guidelines, and don't change their voice. But yes, you absolutely feel free to fix typos, make changes. It would be good, though, to maybe send it back to them and make sure that they approve.
I guess I was more concerned with the spam links that you mentioned, but I guess if it's people that you know, then chances are you won't get the spam links.
Right. And the spammy ones, you'll be able to tell right away. The spammy ones often don't add any sort of new insight. They're just a rewriting of what's on Wikipedia often. And those should jump right out at you. So if the query comes in by email, I'd be the most suspicious. If the query comes in by Twitter or Facebook, I'd be less suspicious. Now there's a great plugin for Gmail called Reported. Do any of y'all use that? Reported is amazing. And anytime someone emails you, it looks up their Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And if they have a profile on any of those, it shows you their photo and what time zone they're in. So when I get emailed from a stranger, I can see if they're on LinkedIn, and I can see what their LinkedIn profile is. So if I have someone, this has been really helpful for domain names. If I'm doing a negotiation with someone on a domain name, and I see that they're on LinkedIn, they have 200 connections, they've been recommended by 5 people, like this person's a real person. There's some validity here, and I can do business with them, as opposed to I can't find them anywhere on social media. It's Reported, it's RAPPORTIVE. Yeah, Google it, and it will fix your spelling if I got it wrong.
It's an app or what?
It's an app that installs into Gmail. And you can also, I'd encourage you to set it up so you can have your own Reported profile. So when people see you on Reported, they're seeing the right things. So it's connecting, and you make sure that you show up on there. Because I found it really helpful. And I find it makes me a friendlier emailer. When I see the face of the person that I'm emailing, I realize that there's a real person on the other end of that email. And can make me a little bit less of a jerk, hopefully. My staff may say something different. Yes, ma'am.
Going back to that attached Twitter and Facebook account to your blog, you were talking about that 9-to-1 ratio. What was that fact again?
So 9 helpful non-salesy posts for every 1 self-promotional post.
And it might be a link to a resource.
Right.
Like one day I was trying to pick a new theme. And I I picked up on a link that had just won the top 20 awards for design. And so I followed that,
right.
And it came from a person I knew that I trusted on Twitter. But it's to be a resource, be a useful advocate for something. And it could be something you just discovered.
Gotcha.
You know.
So one thing we do at Author Media to be a resource is we share lots of encouraging author quotes. So our social media person spent half a day collecting this huge collection of author quotes. And we send these out. And authors get discouraged really easily because there's all of these kind of traps in the publishing process. And so we'll take these quotes, we'll share them on Twitter, we get pretty good action. We also will put the quotes inside of images and post them on Pinterest and on our Facebook page. And those images with the quotes inside get a lot of reshares. We get great results on that. And taking text and putting it on an image makes that text a lot more viral. Don't ask me why. There's something about sharing images that people really like doing. Even if the image is just white with black text on it, it shares better.
And
Yes,
then,
ma'am?
do you have to get permission from the author to quote them?
Well, most of the people we quote are dead. But no, typically you don't get permission to quote a single sentence. That's generally considered fair use, as long as you're attributing it. And so what we'll do is we'll put the quote, we'll put who said the quote, and then sometimes we'll put our website address on there, along with some sort of image that goes along with the quote. Although sometimes we just put white. We also sometimes quote ourselves. If one of my staff writes a blog post and I felt they had a really good sentence, we might highlight that sentence and send it out as a quote, and sometimes those do really well as well. Other questions? Anyone else? Going one? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, on, I wanted to go to how you follow up with your RSS reading.
Okay.
Like, it's interesting, because I registered for a lot of that, but I don't have a regular schedule to get back to it, and there are like eons, masses of stuff.
Yes.
So what, is that just a discipline? How do you manage yours?
So it's happened, the question is, how do you manage RSS subscribing? Because it's really easy to subscribe to stuff on RSS and you get this huge, thousands of feeds to follow. How do you handle it? And one of the things I love about RSS is that typically the sorts of things coming into your feed reader are less urgent. So if you go through a season of life where you're really busy, it's really easy to not do feed reading, and you're not missing critical things mixed in there. Whereas with email, you can't just ignore your inbox for a week and expect to be able to pick back up a week later. There will be fires that were small that are now big. One of the things that I do is I read RSS during time that would normally be wasted. So I don't read RSS feeds very often on my computer. I typically do it on a mobile device when some sort of other computer activity would be inconvenient. And so not gaming on your mobile device is key. If you're doing Angry Birds, that's time that you're not reading RSS feeds. So here's a great app I want to show y'all called Flipboard. Who here uses Flipboard? Anybody? Flipboard users? So Flipboard takes all of your feeds from Google Reader and it puts it into a newspaper format, and you can just turn the pages to go from article to article. And this makes reading blog posts a whole lot more fun. And you're like, huh, that's cool, I want to touch it. It opens up and it gives you the full post of whatever that thing was, whatever that blog post was. Now, if someone has an excerpt, this is one of the reasons I don't like excerpts, it'll just show you the excerpt, and then you have to click again to go read the excerpt and then go back 2 steps. So I recommend you give away the full text. But yeah, you can just flip through here, and what I'll do if I'm using bumping the microphone. When I'm using Flipboard is I'll just scan, just like you would with the newspaper, and I don't make a promise to myself that I'll read every blog post. And I also periodically go and purge if there's a feed that's boring, or I found that I haven't read a post in a certain feed for a certain amount of time, I'll clear it out. And Google actually tracks that data for you. So Google will tell you which posts you're reading in Google Reader. It has some of that data.
Does Flipboard work on, is it an application for a laptop as well, or is it, I know it works on iPad.
So from what I understand, Flipboard currently is on the iPad and on the iPhone, and there's a beta version on Android. I don't think there's a version for it on the PC. There are feed reader apps for the PC, and for the Mac. And the Mac, actually, now that the Mac has an app store, a lot of the apps that you love on your Mac, on your iPhone, are getting ported over to the Mac because they're like, ooh, there's more money. If Apple's winning for us in these 2 places, they may win for us over here.
Will Goodreader do that too? On Mac, that's an iPad.
Yes, I'm not familiar with Goodreader. The app that I actually use the most is not Flipboard, it's NetNewsWire.
Yeah.
So there are probably 50 RSS readers on the iPad, iPhone. They all have different benefits and downsides. Just pick the one you like the most. Or you can just go to reader.google, which is what I did for a long time. Yes, ma'am.
As far as your target audience, In one of the other little workshops, we wrote a composite character as, and I see that there are probably some contradictions here, or lack of focus in that part of it's art-oriented, artist-oriented, buyer-oriented, and dog-oriented. Do I do separate blocks for each one of those?
So the question is, I've got different personas that I'm trying to reach. Should I do separate blogs for them? And it depends on how different those personas are, and it also depends on how much time you have. So often people come, they hear me speak at a conference, they come to a conference like this, and they're like, oh, I want to go and make 5 WordPress blogs on my 5 favorite topics. And I like to warn you that a blog is a lot like a puppy. It's a lot of fun at first, and it's a lot of work over time. And so if you don't have any blogs right now, do not start with 2 blogs. Start with 1. And so that may mean if you have 3 different personas you're trying to reach, pick 1 persona and just blog for that 1 persona, and then later do the other persona. So as a separate blog. That's one strategy. The other strategy is to ignore my advice on focusing and have a blog that's kind of for everything, and see the different topics as like potted plants. And if they get really big, you plant them in their own garden. So this is what I did for my blog, thomasumstattd.com. I blogged on all these different topics, and I found people really resonating with a certain topic. Say, a lot of posts on courtship, which is really controversial. It's getting lots of comments, but not everyone even knows what that is. And so I pulled that off and started a website, Practical Courtship. And what I found was that Practical Courtship grew with no hurt to Thomas Umstattd. So now thomasumstattd.com has no courtship posts, and there are no new ones, and it's getting the same amount of traffic. And so that's the other strategy, is to have a general blog and kind of plant them. iCan has Cheeseburger uses a similar strategy. They've got lots of kind of under-the-radar blogs that they're doing, and they don't promote them really big, and they see if they take off. And if they do, then they promote it and plant it in its own garden. So you have time for perhaps one last question. All right. Okay.
Sorry, I was just picking up on that.
Okay.
I was going to say, actually having your URL, your domain, and then you're having multiple installs of WordPress. Is that what you're talking about?
You could do that. You could also put it on subdomains, or you can put them on their own domain. And that's a strategic decision that would depend. So thank you all so much.